Hey guys, tonight we step into the worn sandals of a Roman apartment janitor. An utterly average day in a bustling insula somewhere in ancient Rome. Picture it. Dawn peeks through cracked shutters, thin shafts of sunlight struggling past the haze of wood smoke and city dust. You awaken on your modest straw mattress, the coarse fibers pressing into your back, the muffled hum of the city already stirring outside your window. You can smell the faint sourness of yesterday's meal lingering in the air, mixed with the sharp scent of wet stone and early morning dew on the cobblestones below. The world outside is waking too. A street vendor grumbles as he sets up his stall. A dog barks somewhere behind a shuttered shop. A distant clatter of carts rolls over uneven stones. This is your world, cramped and noisy, layered with the smells of bread baking, sweat, and the occasional waft of, well, something less pleasant. Like most Roman insulae, those multi-story apartment buildings packed tightly into the city's narrow streets. Your building is a hive of noise, life, and a daily grind. And you? You are its janitor, the silent guardian of the stairwells and hallways, the unseen force that keeps the grime at bay. You probably won't survive this day without stepping into a pile of something questionable, and that's just the first hour. But before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious to see who's joining this late-night stroll through Roman life. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The dawn light presses against your eyelids as you sit up, groaning softly, muscles stiff from the hard floor beneath your mattress. It's not the kind of mattress that cradles your body gently. More a compressed heap of straw sewn into a sack, stuffed into the corner of your small room. It smells faintly of mildew and the faint tang of last week's rain, which seeped through the leaky roof. You know the neighbors above you probably woke hours ago, but your senses are just tuning into the day. The insula you call home is a typical one. 4 stories, maybe 5 if you count the rooftop terrace that only the wealthiest tenants use for drying clothes or escaping the crush below. The building is cramped, its stone and wood frame creaking with the weight of dozens of families packed together like sardines in a can. The plaster walls are cracked, flecked with patches of soot and faded frescoes you barely notice anymore. Outside your window, the street begins to hum with life. You catch a whiff of burning olive oil from a nearby bakery, mixed with the sour bite of spilled wine and something less agreeable from a chamber pot tossed unceremoniously from a higher window. Your first task: prepare yourself for the stairwell. The narrow stone steps wind up from the street like a twisted spine, worn smooth from centuries of foot traffic and littered with every kind of refuse imaginable. Sweeping here is a ritual you've mastered over years, but even now it never fails to surprise you what you find between the cracks. Broken bits of pottery, scraps of food, cigarette-like remnants of dried herbs, and the occasional coin lost by a careless child or distracted tenant. The janitor's broom, a handmade bundle of twigs lashed tightly to a wooden handle, is your trusty companion as you begin the daily climb. The stairwell is dark and often damp, smelling faintly of mold and something you'd rather not identify. Historians still argue whether Roman insula sanitation was better or worse than in other ancient cities. But as you sweep, you know the answer on the ground level at least. It's a mess. Rats scurry into holes as your broom disturbs their dusty hiding places, and you're careful not to startle them too much lest they take their revenge by nibbling at your toes later. You remind yourself to avoid the south corner where a pile of old leaves and discarded food always gathers. The smell is legendary in the building, a smell no amount of vinegar or lye can mask. As you sweep, you think about the people living behind each door. Families, laborers, shopkeepers, a few freedmen trying to claw their way up the social ladder. The insula's tenants are a mixed bag, but mostly working-class folk like you, eking out their survival beneath the towering mansions of the wealthy patricians. Your job is mostly invisible. No one calls you unless the stairs are dangerously slippery or someone's dumped an especially disgusting pile of refuse on the landing. But without you, the building would quickly become a health hazard, a fact the landlord grudgingly admits when he hands you your daily stipend. You pause at the second-floor landing, taking a moment to catch your breath and gaze out the small window that overlooks the street. A young boy chases a chicken, while an old woman yells at him in Latin with a rolling R that suggests she might have been born before the empire stretched this far. You smile faintly, wondering if the empire will still be here by the time you reach retirement, or if, like this stairwell, it will crumble under its own weight. The sun is higher now, casting a warm glow through the grimy window panes and lighting up motes of dust that dance in the air. You run your hand along the cold stone banister, feeling the grooves carved by generations of hands before yours. Somewhere below, a vendor starts shouting about fresh figs and olives, his voice rising over the clamor of carts and chatter. You're reminded that while you clean the building, life goes on all around you. Loud, chaotic, and endlessly messy. You might sweep away yesterday's dirt, but tomorrow brings a fresh layer, and so the cycle continues. A historical fact to tuck away here. The Romans built many of their insulae with wooden beams supporting stone and brick walls. A clever mix to save costs, but a fire hazard waiting to happen. Fires could spread rapidly, which is why narrow streets were often crowded with people trying to escape. You've heard stories of entire blocks lost in a single night, and it makes you quicken your pace just a bit. Speaking of quirky tidbits, did you know that some Roman janitors apparently used vinegar mixed with crushed mouse brains as a cleaning agent? Historians still argue whether this was an effective disinfectant or just a nasty rumor spread by rival workers trying to scare each other. You're not about to test it yourself. The smell alone would probably clear the entire neighborhood. As you sweep, you think about the day ahead, the endless routine of cleaning, fetching water, hauling waste, and dealing with the peculiar demands of tenants who think your job is easy because you just sweep. You know better. Rome is a city that never sleeps, and neither does its dirt. The morning stretches before you, full of the familiar sounds of clattering pots, arguing voices, and the occasional distant horn from a public official's carriage. You brace yourself to face it all, your broom in hand, and a resigned sigh slipping past your lips. And so, the extremely average day begins. The stairwell is your kingdom, and like any ruler of a messy realm, you start by surveying the battlefield. With your trusty broom gripped firmly, you descend to the lobby, ready to face the daily battle against dust, dirt, and the mysterious deposits left by your tenants. The stone steps beneath your feet are cold and uneven, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. You've learned to watch your step because a careless stumble on these narrow stairs could mean a twisted ankle, or worse, a face full of rubble and shame. As you sweep, you notice the dust swirling in the shafts of morning light streaming through the stairwell windows. It looks almost magical, like tiny golden fairies dancing on invisible currents. But you know better. Those motes of dust are made of pulverized stone, bits of crumbling plaster, soot from cooking fires, and the occasional stray insect unlucky enough to meet their end here. Cleaning this place is like battling an invisible enemy that regenerates overnight. You reach the bottom floor landing and find the usual assortment of debris: a crushed fig, a broken pot shard, and a suspicious sticky smear that you pray isn't what you think it is. You swipe it away with your broom, muttering under your breath. Seriously, who drops this stuff and just walks away? The stairwell smells like a blend of stale sweat, damp stone, and something sour you suspect comes from the leaky plumbing somewhere nearby. Sometimes, tenants dispose of their chamber pots by emptying them out of the windows into the street, or, if they're lazy or cruel, right into the stairwell itself. You've become an expert at spotting and removing these unsavory surprises before anyone else steps into them. It's a skill few appreciate, but one that keeps your job from being a complete nightmare. While sweeping, you hear footsteps on the stairs above. It's old Marcus, the tenant from the third floor, grumbling as he makes his slow descent. I swear, these stairs get filthier every day. How do you put up with this, janitor? He asks, shaking his head as he passes. You flash a tired smile. Someone's got to keep it from turning into a cesspit. Marcus. He chuckles, but his face is lined with weariness. Marcus is a retired soldier, his pride still intact, but his body betraying him with every step. His presence reminds you of the many different lives that intersect in this cramped building. The janitor's role isn't just about cleaning. It's about managing the delicate social dance between tenants who live so close their lives intertwine, even if they don't always like it. You've learned which doors hide tempers ready to flare and which ones open to friendly smiles. This knowledge keeps you safe from angry confrontations and helps you navigate the complex web of social hierarchy inside the insula. There's the baker's wife on the first floor, always sending her kids to hide when she sees you, probably to avoid her unpaid debts. Upstairs on the fourth floor lives a wealthy merchant who only ever leaves the building once a week, his nose perpetually in a scroll. You've heard rumors he has a secret stash of exotic spices and sometimes sneaks down to the tavern for a drink when no one's watching. As you sweep past each door, you catch fragments of conversations and the occasional argument. The tenants are always busy debating politics, the latest gladiator match, or the upcoming festival. It's a constant murmur that fills the stairwell, giving life to the otherwise drab stone walls. The stairwell also hides more than just human stories. Rats are a persistent nuisance, scuttling in the shadows, drawn by the scent of food scraps and refuse. You keep a sturdy stick nearby, not just for sweeping, but for shooing away these unwelcome guests. Rats have a notorious reputation in Rome. They're not just pests, but carriers of disease, which is why cleanliness here isn't a mere preference. It's a necessity, a historical fact worth noting. Many Roman insulae were constructed with wooden staircases rather than stone, making them highly susceptible to fires. The wooden stairs creaked and groaned underfoot, and fires could spread rapidly through these buildings. Your stone stairwell, while cold and hard, is at least less flammable, a small mercy in a city where fires could wipe out entire neighborhoods. You pause mid-sweep as a pungent smell wafts up from the basement. You recognize it instantly, the unmistakable odor of decomposing refuse mixed with spilled wine and sour milk. The building's refuse pit is full again, a problem that will keep you busy later. Tenants are supposed to bring their trash down there, but as always, some try to sneak by with small piles dumped in corners of the stairwell or in the street below. You think about the city's sanitation system, or lack thereof. Rome boasted an advanced aqueduct system bringing fresh water into the city and public latrines with flowing water to wash away waste. But for insula dwellers like you, things are far less glamorous. Chamber pots, emptied into the street or in pits, are common, and overflowing drains are a nightmare, especially after rain. Historians still argue whether the ancient Roman sanitation was truly advanced or just a patchwork of ingenious yet flawed systems. You resume sweeping, your broom scratching rhythmically against the stone. There's a strange satisfaction in the repetitive motion, the way the dust gathers in a neat pile at your feet, the squeak of broom against floor, the small victories in clearing away grime that accumulates in impossible places. A quirky detail you remember from your training. Some janitors used to keep a vial of powdered mouse brains as a secret ingredient in their cleaning mixtures. It was said to repel vermin and disinfect surfaces, though many tenants thought it was an excuse to charge extra. Whether it worked or not, you're skeptical. The smell alone would be enough to drive anyone away. While lost in these thoughts, you nearly miss the thudding footsteps of a delivery mule entering the building. The beast grumbles as it carries sacks of grain up to a tenant's floor. You wave and nod to the mule handler, who grins back, sweating beneath a heavy linen tunic. You've come to appreciate these small interactions that punctuate your otherwise solitary workday. Even the animals around here have personalities. The mule is stubborn but reliable. The stray cats are mischievous scavengers. And the dogs, well, they're mostly loud and annoying, but occasionally provide comic relief. Midway through your cleaning, you stop to check the building's communal water jar, one of the few shared resources tenants rely on for cooking and drinking. The jar is half empty, and you make a mental note to fetch fresh water from the public fountain after your stairwell duties. Water is precious here, and the jug often becomes a source of tension among tenants. As you continue your sweep, you notice fresh graffiti scrawled on the wall near the third floor. Veni, vidi, vici, someone is scratched with charcoal. It's a phrase you've heard plenty. I came, I saw, I conquered, and it strikes you as oddly fitting for the daily conquest of the stairwell's endless dirt. You reach the top floor and lean against the cold stone wall, catching your breath. The morning light filters through a narrow window, and for a moment, the grime and sweat fade away, replaced by a brief sense of calm. This moment of peace won't last long. Soon, The tenants will begin their day in earnest, the corridors filling with noise, movement, and new messes for you to clean. You straighten your back and resume your sweep, ready to face whatever the day throws at you. After all, someone has to keep the insula from descending into chaos, and you're the closest thing this building has to a hero. You're halfway through your morning sweep when a sudden clatter from the third floor snaps you out of your reverie. Looking up, you see the door of a cramped apartment swinging open, and out steps a young boy, maybe 10 years old, clutching a bundle of worn scrolls. His clothes are patched and dusty, his bare feet shuffling awkwardly on the cold stone landing. This is Tiberius, the baker's son, more curious than cautious, with a mop of unruly black hair and eyes too sharp for a kid his age. He glances your way and nods shyly before scurrying down the stairs. You can't help but admire his eagerness. In this chaotic building, ambition is a rare commodity. Tiberius dreams of being a scribe one day, copying text for wealthy patrons, or maybe working at the Forum. But for now, he's stuck here in this cramped, noisy tower block, trying to learn Latin grammar from the frayed scrolls he borrows from neighbor. The scrolls he carries remind you how education was a privilege for most Romans, especially those of modest means like your tenants. The wealthy children get tutors, tablets, and access to libraries, while the rest learn what they can from family or from borrowed texts. In fact, many insula residents never set foot beyond their neighborhood, let alone the city's famed academies. As Tiberius hurries past, you catch a whiff of fresh bread, probably from his mother's bakery down below. The smell is comforting in this dusty stone building, a reminder of simpler joys amidst the daily grind. You make a mental note to grab a warm loaf for your own breakfast later, if your meager wage allows. Suddenly, a loud crash echoes from the floor above. You sigh. This building is a symphony of accidents and surprises. You look up to see a large ceramic amphora teetering on the edge of a balcony railing. Before you can react, it slips and shatters on the pavement below, sending shards scattering like a sudden hailstorm. You wince, thinking about the cost. Amphorae are expensive, often filled with precious olive oil or wine. Whoever dropped it won't be happy, and you're sure the landlord will be even less so. Handling the debris quickly becomes your next task. You retrieve a small broom and dustpan, picking up the ceramic shards while trying not to cut yourself. It's a messy business, but you're careful and methodical. You've learned over time that a clean and safe stairwell keeps the tenants from complaining, or worse, getting hurt and blaming you. While cleaning, your thoughts drift to the daily hazards of the job. The insula's construction isn't exactly top-notch. Many buildings were slapped together in a rush to meet the city's explosive population growth. These ancient apartment blocks could be rickety and dangerous. Collapsing walls, leaking roofs, and failing plumbing are constant threats. In fact, there's historical evidence suggesting that building regulations existed in ancient Rome, but enforcement was lax, leading to frequent accidents and sometimes deadly fires. Historians still argue whether the frequent insula collapses were due to poor design or simple overcrowding. Either way, it makes your job feel a bit like disaster management on a micro scale. As you finish sweeping, a faint but persistent squeaking noise draws your attention. It's a rat, darting from a dark corner, eyes gleaming in the low light. You shake your head and grab your trusty stick. With a few swift taps, you send the creature scurrying back into the shadows. These rodents are relentless, and no amount of sweeping can entirely keep them at bay. You suspect the smell of leftover bread crusts, and spilled wine keeps them coming back. Here's a quirky tidbit. Romans used to keep certain cats in their buildings specifically to control the rat population. Some of these cats were even treated as lucky charms, believed to protect households from evil spirits. Unfortunately, you don't have the luxury of feline help in this insula, just your broom and your wits. Tiberius reappears, this time clutching a small wooden writing tablet. He approaches cautiously and asks if you can help him with a difficult Latin phrase. You crouch down beside him, squinting at the faded letters. You give him a quick lesson, pointing out the verbs and nouns. He listens intently, eyes bright with eagerness. For a moment, you forget your aches and the grime under your fingernails. This brief interaction feels like a small victory, a reminder that amidst all the dust and noise, life and learning persist. The building is slowly waking up now. Voices drift from open windows. Laughter, arguments, the occasional shout. The smell of cooking fires rises from below, mixing with the ever-present scent of sweat and stone. Your lungs are beginning to complain about the dust, but you push on. This is your domain, after all, and it won't clean itself. Moving to the next floor, you find the merchant's door slightly ajar. A sharp breeze slips through, carrying the scent of expensive perfumes and exotic spices. You catch a glimpse inside. Shelves lined with rolled parchments, jars filled with mysterious powders, and a cluttered desk littered with coins and ledgers. It's a stark contrast to the squalor of the lower floors. This merchant keeps mostly to himself, rarely descending into the chaos below. Rumor has it he trades with merchants from faraway lands, Egypt, Gaul, even Britannia. Sometimes you wonder what stories his scrolls contain. Historians still debate whether Roman trade networks were as vast and efficient as ancient sources claim, or if many tales are exaggerated. As you step back into the hallway, you hear a soft meow. Turning, you spot a small black cat rubbing against your leg. It's thin but sleek, with bright green eyes that seem to size you up. You smile and scratch behind its ears, feeling the warmth of this small connection in your otherwise solitary routine. The cat, who you've unofficially named Umbra, follows you up the stairs. You sometimes wonder if she belongs to anyone or if she's just the building's unofficial mascot, keeping an eye on the stairwell's endless grime and the occasional mouse invasion. By now, you're approaching the attic level, where the poorest tenants live in cramped rooms with barely enough light to see. The air here smells stale, thick with the scent of damp cloth and unwashed bodies. You remember reading that many of these attic rooms had low ceilings and tiny windows, barely enough ventilation for the overcrowded residents. The janitor's job here isn't just cleaning, but also keeping watch. You've learned which tenants are friendly and which are best avoided. Over the years, you've picked up snippets of gossip and secrets, knowledge that sometimes proves useful in navigating conflicts or protecting yourself. A sudden noise makes you freeze. It's a child crying softly behind a cracked door. You pause, wondering what troubles the little one. Maybe hunger, illness, or just the loneliness that comes from living in such cramped conditions. You make a mental note to check on the baker's boy later. He often helps with chores, but you worry he's overworked. In this moment, you realize the insula is more than just a building. It's a microcosm of Roman urban life, with all its struggles, hopes, and contradictions. Each tenant, each cracked wall, each pile of dust tells a story. You lean your broom against the wall and sit on the cold stone floor, taking a brief rest. The quiet here is different, less chaotic, more oppressive. But it's also a reminder that your work matters. Without someone to keep this place from falling apart, life for these people would be even harder. You glance at your wrist, checking the time. There's still much to do before the day ends. The garbage pit to empty, the plumbing leaks to monitor, and the endless stairs to sweep again. The insula's life hums on around you, a blend of hope and hardship, resilience and decay. You're right in the thick of it, a silent guardian of this crowded vertical neighborhood. And so, with a deep breath, you stand and resume your march through the corridors and stairs, ready for whatever the rest of the day will throw at you. You trudge onward, the rhythmic scrape of your broom against the stone stairs echoing softly through the narrow stairwell. It's that peculiar mix of solitude and background chaos that defines your world. Like being in the eye of a storm where dust motes dance lazily in shafts of sunlight that sneak in through cracked shutters. The smell of damp stone and burnt oil lingers in the air, a reminder that this place has been standing longer than most of the tenants have been alive. This floor is where the mid-level residents live, the shopkeepers, the workshop artisans, and a handful of poorer freedmen who try to keep a toehold in the city's relentless grind. The walls here bear the graffiti of idol use and the faded advertisements for gladiator fights and wine sales. You take a moment to run your fingers along the rough plaster, feeling the ancient whispers embedded in the cracks. You hear footsteps approaching, a hurried clip-clop that's oddly rhythmic. Turning the corner, you spot Marcellus, the shoemaker, carrying a bundle of leather strips under one arm and a small wooden box under the other. He nods at you, and you nod back, both acknowledging the unspoken camaraderie of fellow workers. Marcellus is a stocky man with calloused hands and a perpetually worried expression. His shop is just around the corner, a cramped, fragrant little nook filled with leather scraps, tools, and a constant aroma of beeswax and pitch. He's been grumbling about the rising price of hides lately, which he says is cutting into his profits. You listen with half an ear while you continue your sweep, noting how the city's economy trickles down and tangles with your daily work in ways you don't always see. Romans took their footwear seriously, so serious that sandals weren't just for slaves and peasants, but were carefully designed symbols of status. Marcellus's trade might seem humble, but his shoes can say a lot about who you are. Historians still argue whether common artisans like Marcellus had much social mobility or if they were locked into their station for life. But you know firsthand that hard work and connections can sometimes shift the balance. As you sweep past, Marcellus pauses to point toward a rusted pipe, dripping water slowly into a grimy bucket. "The plumbing's failing again," he mutters. "If the landlord doesn't fix it soon, this whole floor is going to smell worse than the public latrine." That brings to mind a peculiar Roman custom. Some wealthier citizens built elaborate sewer systems beneath their homes to deal with waste and water, but most insulae had only rudimentary plumbing. Many relied on shared public latrines or chamber pots, emptied by night soil collectors who were both essential and socially despised. The complexity of sanitation in ancient Rome is staggering, and historians still argue whether the city's famed aqueducts truly improved everyday hygiene for the average resident or just kept the fountains flowing for the elite. You glance up at the ceiling and notice a faint discoloration spreading around the corroded pipe joint. Water damage is one of the insula's constant enemies. The landlord tries to keep repairs minimal to save money, but shortcuts often mean more work for you, cleaning spills, mopping puddles, and avoiding slippery steps. The daily reality of janitor work is balancing between invisibility and indispensability. Tenants only notice you when something goes wrong, when a stair is slippery or the rubbish pile's too high, but the building depends on you more than they realize. You're the unseen thread holding this patchwork of lives together. Further down the corridor, you stop briefly outside a small room with a cracked wooden door. Behind it is the workshop of Lucius, the weaver. Through the open window, you can see the rhythmic movement of his loom, and the vibrant threads of dyed will stretch taut. Lucius often hums a quiet tune while he works, a melody you suspect comes from the eastern provinces, carried by traders and soldiers returning from the empire's fringes. Weaving is an ancient craft in Rome, one that supported not just the economy, but also the rich social tapestry of fashion and status. The quality of fabric and the dyes used signified wealth and identity, and purple dye, in particular, was a precious commodity reserved for the elite. You've heard that the famous Tyrian purple came from sea snails and was so expensive it was worth more than its weight in gold. Historians still debate how widely such luxury fabrics circulated among common Romans, given their cost. But you know Lucius's cloths are modest, dyed with cheaper plant-based colors, and sold at market stalls rather than palace wardrobes. As you resume sweeping, the conversation drifts back to the tenants and their daily struggles. You overhear a heated exchange from a nearby apartment, raised voices muffled through the thin walls. It's likely a landlord dispute or a quarrel over unpaid rent. These conflicts are common, and your role sometimes extends beyond janitor duties. You act as an unofficial mediator or a discreet listener. You've learned to read the signs, door slams, shouting, tears, and sometimes step in when things threaten to boil over. A quirky historical aside, Roman tenants often had little legal protection. The city's landlords wielded considerable power, and eviction could be swift and merciless. Still, some tenants banded together, forming informal support networks, kind of like proto-neighborhood watch groups. Such communal resilience is a reminder that even in ancient times, people found ways to survive harsh urban life. Your broom strokes bring you toward the stairwell leading to the ground floor. The echoing voices grow louder here. Children playing in the courtyard, merchants hawking their wares, and the occasional clatter of carts over cobblestones. You pause to listen, the cacophony a familiar soundtrack to your days. Suddenly, a flurry of pigeons erupts from the nearby rooftops, fluttering and cooing. The birds swoop low, startling a few passers-by. Pigeons are a constant presence in the city, a living, winged backdrop to Roman life. They were even trained as message carriers during wartime, valued for their homing abilities. Interestingly, historians still argue whether the pigeons you see today in European cities descend directly from those ancient flocks or were introduced later by medieval breeders. Either way, their presence is timeless. Back inside, you continue your rounds, arriving at the refuse pit on the ground floor, a foul-smelling hole in the corner where the building's trash is dumped each day. The garbage is a mix of food scraps, broken pottery, discarded clothes, and occasional bits of luxury items tossed away by tenants trying to hide signs of poverty. Emptying the refuse pit is the least glamorous part of your job. You scoop out the rotting mess into large wooden barrels, careful not to disturb the swarms of flies and the occasional rat lurking within. The stench is enough to make even the hardiest gag, but you steel yourself. This task keeps the building from turning into a festering hazard. Romans had surprisingly organized waste collection systems for their time, with fullers, who processed dirty laundry and collected waste. Still, much garbage was simply dumped into the streets or pits, leading to ongoing health concerns. And so you sweep, mop, and fix, keeping the building alive as the city carries on around you. Historians still argue how effective these early sanitation efforts really were in preventing disease outbreaks like the infamous plagues or frequent cholera. You don't envy the public health officials of those days. Finished with the pit, you wash your hands at a small basin near the courtyard entrance. The water is cold and sometimes smells faintly of herbs added by the landlord to mask odors. It's a small luxury, but it helps refresh your spirits before heading back into the dusty corridors. You pause to watch a group of children playing with a worn leather ball, their laughter ringing out over the clamor of the marketplace. It's moments like these, brief flashes of joy and normalcy, that make the endless chores bearable. As you turn back inside, you think about how much the city itself is like this insula, a bustling, crowded, sometimes grim place, full of people trying to get by, each with their own story. From the grand forums to the narrow alleys, Rome pulses with life, resilience, and complexity. Your work is a small part of this great machine, a humble thread in the vast fabric of the empire. You head up another flight of stairs, each step creaking underfoot like an old song played too often. This floor houses the middle-tier tenants, the scribes, the minor merchants, and the occasional retired soldier who claims a spot after years of service. Their apartments are a bit larger, the walls a touch cleaner, but the same smell of smoke, sweat, and cooking lingers. You can't quite escape it anywhere in the building, no matter how hard you scrub. Today, your main task is clearing out the communal water basin, a large stone trough near the stairwell where residents fetch water for cooking, washing, and drinking. It's always a magnet for gossip, trades, and petty squabbles. You trudge over, the sound of dripping water mixing with the low hum of voices through the cracked windows. Someone is complaining again about the water's taste, blaming the aqueduct upstream. But you know it's mostly the trough's grime and the rats that sneak in at night. Water was a prized commodity in ancient Rome. Thanks to the aqueducts, the city had a seemingly endless supply flowing from distant mountains, but only the wealthiest had private fountains or baths. Most common folk shared communal taps or carried buckets from the public fountains. Historians still argue whether the distribution systems were truly egalitarian or reinforced social divides. From your daily routine, it's clear that access to clean water is a constant struggle here. While scrubbing the basin, you notice a small piece of pottery stuck between the stones, an old shard with a painted figure, worn but still hinting at some faded glory. You set it aside for the building's collector, a quirky elderly tenant who believes every scrap holds a story. You smile. Even janitors appreciate a little mystery now and then. As you work, you hear footsteps above, soft thudding and whispered conversations. Upstairs is where the wealthier tenants live, bureaucrats, wealthy freedmen, and even a senator's minor relative. Their apartments are grander, decorated with colorful mosaics, plush cushions, and delicate oil lamps. The contrast between floors feels like stepping into different worlds, all stacked vertically in this wooden-end stone tower. Your broom leans against the wall while you mop the basin area, and you catch sight of a young girl peeking through a cracked door. She watches you curiously, clutching a rag doll with one hand while holding back tears with the other. Kids in the building are used to your presence, but you know her, Claudia. Her family's been struggling since her father lost his job. You offer a small nod and a smile. Sometimes, that's all you can do. In ancient Rome, childhood was a brief but intense period. Many children faced hard lives, and infant mortality was high. However, family bonds remained strong. Some kids played freely in the courtyards and alleyways, while others took on chores early. Historians still debate how much childhood in Rome resembled modern ideas of innocence and play. But you witness daily how children cling to moments of joy amid hardship. You finish cleaning the basin and refill it with water fetched from the street fountain. The basin will serve as a lifeline for many tenants throughout the day, washing clothes, quenching thirst, and filling pots. You pause, savoring the cool droplets that splash on your hands. It's a simple pleasure, but precious in a city that never truly sleeps. Next, you move toward the laundry room, a cramped space that smells of wet linen and soap. You're here to collect soiled towels and garments left by tenants, destined for the full ones, the specialized laundry workers who clean clothes with a mix of water, alkaline substances, and a lot of elbow grease. The fullers are vital to Rome's hygiene and economy, but their trade was famously smelly and messy, often carried out in separate workshops. The dirty laundry piles up fast, and you're careful not to let any stray rags fall behind the wash basins. While handling the textiles, you spot a vibrant piece of cloth, a brightly dyed scarf with faded gold threads woven in intricate patterns. It belongs to Flavia, the senatorial relative living just a floor above. You've heard rumors that she's embroiled in some scandal involving the imperial court, but like all gossip in the building, it's hard to separate truth from fantasy. Cloth dyeing was a prestigious and secretive craft in Rome. Purple and gold signified wealth and status, but such fabrics were costly and rare. Dyes came from various sources, including mollusks and plants, and the process was labor-intensive. Historians still argue whether such luxury textiles were truly reserved for the elite or if the growing middle class could occasionally afford them. As you leave the laundry room, you encounter the building's resident philosopher, Gaius, an old man who peddles wisdom and cynicism in equal measure. He's perched on a broken stool, a weathered scroll rolled up at his side, and eyes twinkling behind thick glasses. "Ah, the unsung hero of the insula," he calls out, waving you over. "Tell me, does cleaning the city's filth clear the mind as well?" You chuckle, shaking your head. "If only Gaius. Mostly it just makes my arms ache." He laughs, the sound deep and genuine. True enlightenment is rare, and dust is a persistent foe. Gaius's favorite debate revolves around whether philosophy should be a practical guide to living or an abstract pursuit detached from everyday life. You've heard it many times, and each time, you think about how your own job fits into the grander scheme. Maybe cleaning is its own kind of philosophy, finding order in chaos, one sweep at a time. The philosopher waves you away with a grin as you continue your rounds. You pause by a small shrine tucked into the corner, a simple altar to Vesta, goddess of the hearth and home. Tenants leave small offerings of breadcrumbs or coins, hoping for her protection. Household gods were central to Roman life, guarding families and the building's welfare. Each insula had its own minor deities, and neglecting them was considered an ill omen. Historians still argue how sincere these beliefs were for average Romans, devotion or just tradition. You find it comforting, in any case. Nearby, you spot a cat lazily stretched out on a pile of discarded fabrics. It eyes you with sleepy disdain, but doesn't move. Cats were valued in Rome for keeping vermin under control, a practical and popular pet. The feline's presence is a small mercy in a place where rats often outnumber residents. You round the corner to the communal kitchen area where a few tenants have gathered, chatting over morning bread and olives. The smell of fresh baking tempts you, but you stay focused. No breaks for janitors. Still, you can't help but smile at the small moments of warmth and community. One tenant, a middle-aged woman named Livia, greets you with a nod. She's the building's unofficial spokesperson and often handles complaints or requests. You exchange quick updates. She asks if you can check the flickering oil lamp in the hallway, and you promise to fix it before dusk. Oil lamps were the lifeblood of Roman evenings, their flickering light a fragile defense against the darkness. Maintaining them was a constant chore. Too little oil, and the flames sputtered. Too much, and the lamps smoked. Historians still debate how widespread electric lighting rumors are in ancient texts, but you're pretty sure that oil was the only option. As you finish your chores, you hear the distant call of a market crier announcing the day's news and wares. The city's pulse beats steadily outside these walls, a reminder that life continues beyond your sweep. With the basin clean, laundry collected, and lamps checked off your list, you lean against the wall and catch your breath. The work is hard, repetitive, but it also connects you to a living, breathing community. This floor, with its scribes, merchants, and dreamers, is a microcosm of Rome itself. Vibrant, messy, and alive. And as you prepare to head up to the next level, you know you'll do it all again tomorrow. You climb the last flight of stairs, the air growing thicker and warmer with each step. This top floor is where the wealthier tenants live, or at least, wealthier by the building's modest standards. It's a small slice of the Roman elite crammed into cramped quarters that would still feel palatial compared to the lower levels. Polished marble tiles, frescoes faded but still proud on cracked walls, and larger windows let in more sunlight, casting long shadows in the dusty corners. You can almost smell the expensive perfumes leaking from behind the ornate doors. Your job here is a delicate balance of cleaning duties and subtle diplomacy. Tenants on this floor tend to be temperamental, sometimes dismissive of the janitor's presence, as if you were merely a background fixture rather than the person keeping their world from unraveling. You trudge through polished corridors, broom and rag in hand, careful to avoid disrupting the elaborate arrangements of oil lamps and flower garlands. One apartment's door swings open just as you pass by. A well-dressed man, a freedman who made his fortune in shipping, beckons you inside. His name is Marcus, and he's known for his loud voice and endless tales of sea voyages, storms, and exotic ports. Today, he needs you to fix a leaking water pipe in his kitchen. A luxury problem to you, but a serious crisis to him. You nod and follow him through gleaming rooms filled with wooden chests, silk cushions, and an unusual number of bronze statues. Water pipes in Roman buildings were an engineering marvel of their time. Lead pipes, fistulae, carried water from the aqueducts directly into homes, and wealthy tenants like Marcus often had private taps and even indoor plumbing for baths and fountains. Historians still argue whether lead poisoning was a widespread problem or an exaggerated myth, but considering your constant contact with those pipes, you suspect something's off about the whole system. You crouch under the kitchen sink, hands covered in grime, trying to locate the leak. It's a slow drip, barely noticeable until the puddle starts spreading. Fixing it means disassembling part of the pipe and resealing the joints with pitch and cloth. You work efficiently, but carefully. A broken pipe here could flood the whole floor and bring an angry storm for Marcus. While you work, Marcus rambles on about a recent scandal involving a senator's daughter, a tale filled with whispered accusations and hidden liaisons. The building's top floor is rife with political gossip, the kind that could cost a man his reputation or his life. You listen half-heartedly, more focused on the task, but your mind wanders. Gossip, like dust, seems to settle everywhere. The social dynamics of Rome's upper crust were complex and layered. Freedmen, like Marcus, were often wealthy and influential, but always a step below the traditional aristocracy. Their presence in these apartments speaks to a subtle shift in society, one that historians still debate. Was Rome's elite truly rigid, or did wealth and cunning allow some to break through the old barriers? With the leak fixed, you wipe your hands on your tunic and prepare to leave, but Marcus stops you. He offers a small cup of watered wine, a rare treat in your day, and insists you take a moment. The wine tastes sharp and bitter, but you nod in thanks, knowing that small kindnesses can smooth many rough edges. Leaving Marcus's apartment, you continue down the hall, eyes catching on a peculiar detail, a small mosaic embedded near the doorway of another suite. It depicts a pair of gladiators locked in combat, a popular theme meant to symbolize strength and honor. You pause to admire it. These mosaics were the pinnacle of Roman art, crafted from thousands of tiny stones and glass pieces, designed to last for centuries. Gladiatorial games were not just entertainment, but a deeply ingrained cultural ritual in Rome. They reinforced social hierarchies and the virtues of courage and endurance. Historians still argue whether these events were brutal spectacles or important communal experiences shaping Roman identity. From your vantage point, you see only the faded glory of these images, a reminder of a world both thrilling and merciless. You pass a door where a group of children plays quietly, their laughter muffled behind heavy curtains. The wealthy families had nannies and tutors, ensuring the kids learned rhetoric, philosophy, and music. Education was a privilege few enjoyed, reserved for the sons, and sometimes daughters, of the elite. You remember your own childhood lessons in basic reading and counting, starkly different from these gilded halls. As you sweep the corridor outside, you notice a servant rush by carrying a silver platter piled high with fresh fruit and nuts. The opulence contrasts sharply with the smells and sights you left below. You're reminded that in Rome, luxury and poverty often shared the same building, stacked floor by floor like a social ladder you climb daily, broom in hand. You finish the hall cleaning and move toward the rooftop terrace, a communal space where the tenants gather at dusk to catch the breeze and escape the city's heat. The terrace offers a panoramic view of the sprawling cityscape, red-tiled roofs, winding streets, distant temples, and a hazy outline of the Forum. The roof is also where the building's water cistern is located, a large stone tank collecting rainwater for the residents' use. Your next chore is to check the cistern for cleanliness. It's a dirty job, requiring you to climb inside a narrow opening and remove debris, fallen leaves, and the occasional critter. You don't relish the task, but it's necessary. Rainwater collection was an essential supplement to Rome's aqueduct supply, especially during dry spells. These cisterns prevented water shortages and helped with firefighting. Historians still debate how effective these systems were during peak demand or crisis, but you trust your daily experience over any scholarly argument. Climbing down carefully into the cistern, you start scooping out muck with your hands, feeling the cold, slimy water against your skin. The darkness is absolute, broken only by a sliver of sunlight from above. It's a quiet place, except for the occasional drip of water and the distant sounds of the city below. A few cockroaches scuttle past, but you're used to these unwelcome companions. As you work, you think about the tenants' lives unfolding beneath the roof, their parties, whispered secrets, and ambitions. Sometimes, you imagine yourself part of their world, not the invisible janitor, but a guest at their feasts, sharing laughter and fine wine. Then you remind yourself that you are the one who keeps their world clean, grounded, and functioning. Emerging from the cistern, you shake off water droplets and climb back to the terrace. The sun has begun its slow descent, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Tenants start gathering for their evening relaxation. A few toss you nods or murmured thanks, small tokens that brighten the day. The city breathes around you, a mix of noises, scents, and shadows. Somewhere below, a street vendor calls out, selling olives and honey cakes. The scent drifts up, mingling with the evening breeze. You take a deep breath, letting the sounds and smells soak in, a moment of peace amid your endless chores. As you prepare to leave the terrace, your eyes catch a flicker of movement near the rooftop garden. A few potted herbs and flowers carefully tended by one tenant. You admire the green life, thriving amid stone and dust. Gardening in a Roman insula is a rare luxury, but it reminds you that even in the busiest city, nature finds a way. Your final task before leaving the top floor is to check the lamps in the hallway. Oil lamps here are more elaborate, made of bronze and decorated with intricate patterns. Lighting them takes care. A flickering flame can throw dramatic shadows, setting the mood for evening gatherings or quiet solitude. You carefully refill each lamp's reservoir, trimming the wicks to ensure steady flames. The warm glow spreads softly along the corridor walls, turning harsh edges into gentle curves. It's a small magic trick, but it brightens the building's darkest corners. Before you descend for the final time today, you pause at the top of the stairs and glance back. The insula stands tall, a towering hive of life, work, and dreams. each floor stacked with stories, struggles, and hopes. And you, janitor, cleaner, witness to it all, are part of that living mosaic. You begin your way down, ready to start again tomorrow, armed with a broom, a rag, and the quiet knowledge that even the most ordinary days in Rome hold extraordinary lives. You're back on the middle floors now, where the rhythm of life beats a little louder, a little messier. These are the apartments of the common folk, shopkeepers, artisans, minor clerks, and the occasional retired soldier who still boasts about his campaigns in Gaul. The air is thicker here, filled with the sense of cooking fires, wet laundry, and sometimes something less easy to name, but always present, the smell of hard, daily living. Your footsteps echo in narrower corridors, the walls scuffed and cracked, plaster peeling like tired skin. Today, as you make your rounds, you feel the pulse of these floors more than ever. The noises, the smells, the shifting light through small windows, it all blends into a living symphony that reminds you why you do this job. Not just to clean, but to witness. You pause outside a blacksmith's cramped workshop, where the rhythmic clanging of hammer on anvil fills the air. The smith is a burly man named Gaius, his arms thick as tree trunks, face streaked with soot and sweat. You stop to catch a whiff of the smoke and hot metal. Blacksmiths were essential in Roman daily life, forging tools, horseshoes, and weapons. Their craft was a mix of brute strength and precise skill, practiced for generations. It's said that blacksmithing was sometimes linked to divine power. Vulcan, the god of fire and forge, was the patron deity of smiths. There's a bit of reverence for this dangerous art, even if you're glad your job keeps you safely outside the furnace's glow. The hallway shifts suddenly as a group of children races by, their laughter echoing off the stone. You smile despite yourself. These kids are a noisy bunch, darting past without a care, their small feet pounding on the uneven floors. Many of them run barefoot, their toes curling over rough tiles, their clothes patched but clean. Playgrounds in Rome weren't elaborate. A dusty courtyard or narrow street sufficed. Their games were simple but loud. Marbles, tag, and the occasional game of knucklebones using small bones or stones. You remember those from your own childhood, how the tiny objects clicked together like little promises of joy. Near one door, you spot a faded sign written in charcoal on a piece of scrap wood, Ludi Magister's room. The tutor's quarters. A rare presence here. Many children learn their letters and numbers in informal settings, often taught by parents or through apprenticeships. The Roman education system was a privilege, often reserved for boys of wealthier families. Historians still argue whether public education was ever truly accessible to the lower classes, or if it was mostly a myth crafted by the elite to suggest a meritocratic society. As you sweep the hallway, a woman opens her door, carrying a basket filled with laundry. Her name is Lucia, a widow who runs a small stall selling bread in the nearby market. She nods at you, tired but kind. The bread here is a staple. Hard, dense loaves made from barley or wheat, sometimes mixed with bits of bran or chickpeas for flavor. Bread was the foundation of the Roman diet, especially for commoners. The famous bread and circuses policy ensured that the population had enough to eat, or at least enough to keep them from rebellion. You remember hearing rumors about the grain dole, free grain distributed to poor citizens by the government to keep them fed. Historians debate how much the dole helped maintain social order, or whether it created dependence and unrest. Your own experience suggests a bit of both. Some neighbors gratefully line up for their share, while others grumble about the quality or the weight. Lucia invites you briefly into her home to help her with a stubborn stain on a tunic, and you enter a small, cluttered room lit by a single oil lamp. The walls are rough and uneven, decorated with a few family portraits and a small shrine to the household gods, Laras and Penates. These small statues and figurines hold a special place in Roman homes, meant to protect the family and bring good fortune. You catch the flickering light reflecting off the worn faces, feeling a quiet respect for these ancient beliefs still alive in this modest space. While scrubbing, you overhear Lucia talking softly to her daughter about the upcoming festival of Vulcanalia, a fire-related celebration where people offer sacrifices to the god of fire and forge. It's a small reminder that religion in Rome was woven tightly into daily life, Not just grand temples, but humble homes too. The Vulcanalia's fires symbolized both destruction and renewal, a perfect metaphor for life in the city's cramped apartments. You leave Lucia's home, stepping back into the hallway where a stray cat darts past your feet, tail flicking impatiently. Cats were common companions in Rome, appreciated for their hunting skills, but also regarded with a kind of superstition. Some believed cats brought good luck. Others whispered about their association with witches or bad omens. Historians still debate the cultural significance of cats in Roman society. Were they beloved pets, or more mysterious figures lurking in the shadows? Your next stop is the communal latrines, a shared toilet facility for the tenants on these floors. The latrines are not exactly glamorous. Long stone benches with holes, set above a channel of running water that carries waste away. Despite the lack of privacy, these spaces were surprisingly social hubs where neighbors exchanged gossip, advice, and the occasional complaint about the city's noisy streets. You've always found it odd how some of the most basic human functions could become a setting for such lively conversation. Cleaning the latrines is one of your less favorite tasks. The smell is strong, a mix of ammonia and stale water, and you have to keep the drainage channels clear to avoid backups. Romans were advanced engineers, but sewage systems were still far from perfect. The Cloaca Maxima, Rome's great sewer, was a marvel of infrastructure, but localized blockages were common. Historians still argue whether the average citizen's health benefited much from these systems, or if they merely masked deeper public sanitation problems. As you scrub and rinse, you hear voices outside the latrine entrance. Two older men debate politics loudly, their words carrying through the thin walls. They argue over the recent appointment of a new governor in the province of Asia, whether he's competent or corrupt. Politics, it seems, is never far from any Roman's mind, even in the humblest corners of the city. You finish your latrine chores and move toward the stairwell. On the landing, a broken tile catches your eye. It's a simple piece of pottery embedded in the floor mosaic, cracked but still beautiful in its faded colors. The mosaic depicts a vine winding around a cluster of grapes, symbolizing fertility and prosperity. Mosaics were common decoration in wealthier homes, but here, they serve as a reminder that beauty can persist even in humble surroundings. You stop to rest for a moment, leaning on your broom, and glance out the narrow window. The street below is bustling with life. Vendors calling out their wares, children chasing each other, a dog barking at a passing cart. You watch a group of women gossiping animatedly near a well, their voices rising and falling like music. The life of the middle floors is a constant hustle, a mix of struggle and community. You feel the weight of their stories, the invisible threads connecting you to each tenant. They might never notice the janitor's presence, but you are their silent witness, their daily constant. As you resume your cleaning, your mind drifts to the night ahead. Will the noises from these floors echo into your dreams? Will the scent of bread or the clang of the smith's hammer follow you into sleep? Probably, and that's fine. Life in this building is a mosaic of moments, each one adding color to the day. You finish your tasks here and prepare to descend to the lower floors. The sounds of the middle floors fading behind you, but their stories lingering in your thoughts. You step onto the lower floors now, the ground level, where the pulse of the city beats strongest and the chaos of Roman street life spills directly into the building's veins. Here, the air is heavy with a mixture of scents: roasted meat from the nearby thermopolium, the sharp tang of vinegar, the faint but persistent odor of the Tiber River a few blocks away. Your boots echo against the worn stone floors, slightly more polished from centuries of foot traffic, but also dirtier in a way that feels immediate and raw. This floor houses the shops and workshops of tradesmen and merchants, the real engines of urban commerce. The clatter of wooden carts rolling past outside vibrates through the walls, and from somewhere nearby, a merchant loudly hawks his wares in a language peppered with Greek and Latin phrases. Multicultural Rome is alive and kicking here, a bustling mosaic of peoples and tongues. You catch snippets of conversation in broken accents, Egyptian, Syrian, Gaulish, reminding you how vast the empire really is. One shop window draws your attention, an apothecary small counter, cluttered with jars filled with dried herbs, powders, and strange-looking roots. You know that apothecaries were precursors to pharmacists, mixing remedies and potions for the city's ailments. Their knowledge often straddled the line between medicine and superstition. It's said that some Roman doctors used crocodile dung as a contraceptive, a quirky fact you file away, wondering how anyone ever dared try it. As you sweep near the apothecary, the owner, a wizened woman named Aurelia, nods at you. Her face is lined with years of city life, but her eyes are sharp and observant. She hands you a small vial of lavender oil as thanks for cleaning near her shop. Lavender was prized for its fragrance and believed to ward off evil spirits and bad smells. A luxury, even if modest, that you don't take for granted. The lower floors are louder than the ones above. You can hear the clinking of coins as merchants bargain fiercely, the clatter of goods being moved, and the occasional bark of a dog guarding a stall. The shops here sell everything from fresh fish to pottery, fabric to jewelry. You notice a vendor selling honey cakes wrapped in beeswax, sweet, sticky treats that are a favorite among children and adults alike. Honey was more than a sweetener. It was used medicinally and symbolized wealth and health. Nearby, a street performer is juggling flaming torches, drawing a small crowd of amused onlookers. Fire tricks are popular street entertainment, and some performers claim divine protection from Vulcan himself. Historians still argue whether these public entertainments were a sign of Rome's cultural richness or a distraction from the city's many social problems. As you mop the floor near the entrance to a small taberna, the smell of garum wafts out, a pungent fermented fish sauce used to flavor almost every Roman dish. You wrinkle your nose, but respect its cultural significance. Garum was a culinary staple, much like soy sauce or ketchup in other times and places, although probably less charming on your shoes. The taberna's door swings open, and a group of soldiers in dusty armor stride out, laughing and jostling one another. They pay you little mind, caught up in their own world of post-shift camaraderie. The life of a Roman soldier was harsh, filled with long campaigns and strict discipline, but off-duty, they embraced the city's pleasures with enthusiasm. Some of these men might have fought in the recent wars in Britannia or Germania. Historians still debate how much of the soldiers' experience shaped Rome's urban culture versus the rural provinces. You glance up at the ceiling, where wooden beams creak faintly, supporting the floors above. The building's architecture is practical but resilient. Stone foundations with brick and wood above, designed to withstand the city's occasional earthquakes and fires. Fire was the biggest threat to buildings like this, a constant risk that forced Romans to develop early versions of fire brigades, called the vigiles. These firefighters also doubled as night watchmen, patrolling streets and preventing crimes in the city's labyrinthine alleys. As you continue cleaning, a scrawny cat jumps onto a crate nearby, eyeing you with mild curiosity before slipping away into a dark corner. Cats are common companions for merchants, valued for keeping rodents at bay. In fact, some merchants treated their cats like lucky charms, believing they protected their precious goods from spoilage and theft. Your broom sweeps across a scattered pile of coins, dropped or forgotten. You pick them up, feeling the weight of copper and bronze in your palm. Coinage was one of the empire's great unifiers. The image of the emperor stamped on every piece a reminder of Rome's reach and power. Yet, for most residents here, those coins barely stretch far. Historians still argue whether the coin economy truly reached all levels of society, or if barter and informal exchanges dominated everyday trade. Nearby, a child selling figs calls out in a high-pitched voice, waving a basket filled with the fruit. Figs were a popular snack, and often used in religious rituals as offerings to the gods. You remember the occasional story about how figs symbolize fertility and prosperity, adding another layer to their simple sweetness. The market's constant noise and movement make your job a challenge. Spilled grain, dropped fruit, and discarded scraps create a messy dance floor for your broom. You're careful not to trip on loose stones or slick patches left by the daily rain. The streets outside can be surprisingly muddy when the Tiber floods its banks, a seasonal nuisance that adds another layer of complexity to urban life. You pass a wall plastered with election notices, faded posters calling for support of various candidates vying for public office. Roman elections were boisterous affairs, often involving bribery, shouting matches, and neighborhood alliances. The phrase bread and circuses wasn't just about food and entertainment. It was also about political promises made in noisy forums like this. Suddenly, a shout rings out from the street. A vendor is arguing with a client over the price of olives. You catch the glint of small bronze scales used to weigh goods, an ancient technology still holding steady in a world without digital calculators. The olives smell sharp and briny, a taste favored by Romans, often served with wine or as a snack. Your attention is pulled to a nearby building entrance where a group of men gather around a wooden board displaying the day's news, a list of deaths, births, and events posted for public knowledge. The practice of public postings was an early form of news sharing, long before newspapers existed. It's said that even Julius Caesar relied on public proclamations to shape opinion. You pause to pick up a stray sandal left by a child and consider the daily realities of those who live here. Life on the lower floors is a constant hustle, a delicate balance of survival and hope, commerce and community. The janitor's job might seem invisible to most, but you're intimately tied to this ecosystem, the silent thread connecting every corner. As the sun lowers, casting long shadows through the narrow streets outside, you finish your rounds here and prepare to ascend the stairs once again. The contrast between the lively, chaotic ground floor and the quieter middle floors reminds you how layered this city truly is. Each level a world of its own, buzzing with stories you'll carry with you into the night. The stairs creak underfoot as you climb back up to the middle floors, where the residential apartments of ordinary Romans, mostly plebs like you, crowd together in a maze of corridors and stairwells. Here, the noise fades into a dull murmur, interrupted occasionally by the barking of dogs or the laughter of children playing in narrow courtyards. The smell changes too, less the sharp vinegar and smoke of the shops below, and more the subtle blend of cooking fires, damp stone, and the faint musk of countless bodies pressed into close quarters. You pause briefly on the landing to catch your breath and glance down the hallway. The plaster on the walls is chipped and cracked in places, revealing the rough brick underneath. Even the brightest frescoes, once vibrant with mythological scenes or daily life, have faded or peeled away, a reminder that time is the great eraser. You remember hearing that some wealthier residents had mosaic floors made from tiny pieces of colored stone or glass, luxuries for the upper floors. Historians still argue whether these decorative arts were widely appreciated by common folk or just symbols of elite status. You step inside one apartment block, where families cram into small rooms that double as kitchens, bedrooms, and living spaces. In one corner, a woman stirs a pot over a small clay stove, the aroma of lentils and herbs filling the cramped room. Cooking fires like these are often the source of accidental fires in apartment blocks, and city officials enforce fire prevention rules that residents grumble about endlessly. You sweep carefully around the edges of the room, mindful not to disturb the family's modest possessions. Simple wooden stools, a few clay pots, and some woven baskets. Children peek at you shyly from behind doorways, their faces smudged with dirt, but eyes bright with curiosity. You remember that Roman children often played with dolls made from clay or cloth, or wooden toys shaped like animals. The middle floors are where life feels most ordinary and human. The endless ebb and flow of daily routines, joys, and struggles of the grand histories often overlook. As you move through the corridor, you pass a laundry area where clothes hang damp on ropes strung between walls. The smell of soap made from animal fat and ashes mingles with the mustiness of wet fabric. Laundry in Rome was laborious. Many residents used public laundries or hired full ones, specialized workers who cleaned clothes using alkaline clay and urine. The latter might sound odd, but the ammonia helped break down grease and dirt. You wonder if the residents here are fortunate enough to use such services, or if they simply wash by hand in the river or communal basins. Nearby, a small shrine dedicated to Vesta, goddess of the hearth and home, sits tucked into a corner. A tiny oil lamp flickers gently, casting dancing shadows on the faded image of the goddess. Vesta's eternal flame was sacred in Roman culture, representing family unity and protection. People often left small offerings or prayers for safety and health. You brush a light layer of dust from the shrine, careful not to disturb the reverence it commands. Your broom catches on a bundle of discarded papers scattered on the floor, fragments of letters and receipts. Literacy wasn't universal in Rome. Estimates suggest maybe only 10 to 20% of the population could read or write, mostly men, merchants, and bureaucrats. But writing was spreading, especially in cities. You pick up a crumpled scrap bearing a hastily scribbled message and wonder who it was meant for. Historians still argue whether the growth of literacy fundamentally changed Roman society, or if oral traditions remained dominant. Suddenly, you hear a faint tune drifting through an open window. A woman sings softly as she weaves fabric on a loom. Textile production was a major domestic task in Roman households. Many families made their own clothes or engaged in small-scale textile work to earn extra money. Wool and linen were common materials, dyed in colors ranging from the plain to vibrant purples reserved for the elite. The sound is soothing, a small moment of calm amid the bustling city. A group of children race past you, laughing and chasing one another down the hall. They pause to stop and catch their breath near a doorway, where an elderly man is seated, carving a wooden figurine. His hands move with surprising skill and patience, turning a rough block into a delicate soldier. Small artisans like him often worked in their homes or local workshops, providing goods for everyday life. The presence of such craftsmen highlights the diverse economy, supporting even humble apartments. You glance at the narrow stairwell leading to the upper floors, feeling the day's weight in your shoulders, but knowing you'll be climbing higher soon. The stairs are dim, lit only by the occasional oil lamp flickering in wall sconces. The lighting here is minimal by design, to save oil and prevent fires. Yet the shadows seem to hide stories, whispered gossip, stolen glances, and the secret lives of the city's dwellers. Your broom scrapes gently against the worn steps as you clean the landing. You notice scuff marks and stains, a patch of mud from a careless boot, a smear of charcoal, a faint stain that looks suspiciously like spilled wine. These marks tell their own tales of late-night parties, hurried escapes, or daily messes. Each stain is a little mystery you'll never fully know. You pause by a window overlooking the courtyard below. Children play a game resembling handball, their shouts echoing upward. The courtyard is a common space where neighbors gather for gossip, celebrations, or a moment of escape from the confines of cramped apartments. You remember reading that some Roman neighborhoods were surprisingly close-knit, with residents sharing food, favors, and news. Yet others remain suspicious and wary of strangers, conditions that could spark tensions or worse. From your vantage point, you glimpse a woman carrying water jars from the public fountain, a vital resource that supplies the building and many others. Access to clean water was a huge achievement of Roman engineering, thanks to the vast network of aqueducts that brought fresh water miles into the city. Still, water shortages and sanitation issues occasionally arose, especially in the lower and middle floors. Historians still argue how effectively the empire maintained its water systems over the centuries. You finish sweeping the hallway and approach a narrow doorway leading to a small storage room packed with odds and ends, brooms, buckets, broken furniture, and the occasional abandoned pet birdcage. You wonder about the stories behind each discarded object. The life of a janitor means you often witness the leftover pieces of people's lives, the little bits they no longer need but can't quite bring themselves to throw away. The midday sun filters through the windows as you take a brief moment to lean on your broom. The light hits the dust particles floating in the air, making them sparkle faintly, tiny motes dancing in a slow, lazy ballet. It's moments like this that remind you why you don't mind the monotony. The city is alive, even in its quietest corners. As you move to your next task, the faint rumble of a cart rolling over cobblestones from outside catches your attention. You look down the hall to see a merchant wheeling a crate filled with fresh fish. Fish was a staple protein for many Romans, especially those who lived inland and relied on salted or dried varieties brought in from the coast. The smell is strong but familiar. You remember that fish sauce, garum, was often made from the leftover parts, fermenting in barrels to create that pungent staple seasoning. You make your way toward the stairwell once more, thinking about the upper floors where the wealthier tenants live. The apartments up there are bigger, better lit, and often decorated with fine furniture and art. Your work will continue there soon, but for now, The middle floors have claimed your attention, a microcosm of Roman urban life, where ordinary people live their quietly extraordinary stories. You push open the heavy wooden door to the upper floors, where the atmosphere shifts as quickly as the change in elevation. The air here feels a little cooler, fresher even, as if the higher up you go, the further you escape the grime and chaos of the bustling streets below. The apartments are noticeably larger, and you can see traces of wealth in the polished stone floors, the well-oiled hinges of the doors, and the faint aroma of expensive perfumes wafting through slightly open windows. As you start sweeping the marble corridors, you catch a glimpse of the residents, a mix of merchants, minor officials, and retired veterans who have somehow clawed their way into a better life. Their clothes are finer, and their footsteps carry a more measured confidence. The noises here are softer, quiet conversations in Latin and Greek, the occasional clink of glass from dinner preparations, and distant music played on a lyre. One resident you spot is an older man reclining in a high-backed chair beside his window, holding a scroll. You recognize the scholarly look about him, his white beard trimmed neatly, eyes tracing lines of ink. He might be a former senator or a lawyer, someone who enjoys the luxury of knowledge. You recall that many upper-class Romans prized education and rhetoric above almost all else. Historians still argue whether this emphasis on oratory shaped Rome's politics for better or worse. As you move down the hall, you hear the faint hum of conversation from a room where several women sit, embroidering silk garments. Embroidery was a popular pastime among upper-class Roman women, a way to display wealth and artistic skill. The fine silks were often imported from the East, dyed in vibrant colors that stood out sharply against the drab tunics of the lower floors. You notice a delicate pattern of vines and grapes being stitched, a nod to Bacchus, the god of wine and festivity, perhaps a subtle invitation to secret parties. Your broom scrapes the smooth floor as you sweep past a richly decorated alcove, where a statue of Fortuna, the goddess of luck, stands. The statue's blindfolded face and spinning wheel remind the residents of fate's fickle nature, a comfort and a warning wrapped into one. You gently dust the pedestal, mindful of the reverence this figure commands. Small tokens, coins, tiny carved figurines are often left as offerings here. The presence of Fortuna tells you that even the wealthier residents knew the precariousness of their fortunes, which could rise or fall with the slightest political shift. You glance into a dining room where a family prepares for their evening meal. The table is set with fine pottery and silver utensils, luxuries beyond the reach of most Romans. They're discussing news from the forum, mentioning the latest decrees and gossip about a newly appointed magistrate. You recall that the forum was not just a marketplace, but the political and social heart of Rome, where laws were made and broken and reputations forged. A servant enters the room, balancing a tray laden with wine and bread, moving with practiced grace. Servants in wealthier homes were often educated slaves or freedmen who could read and write, a step above the laborers you see below. This social mobility is one of those quirks that fascinates historians. How a slave might become a trusted household manager, or even gain freedom and wealth, blurring the rigid social lines. Your attention is drawn to the ceiling frescoes, depicting scenes of mythology, Jupiter hurling lightning bolts, Venus reclining with cupids, Mars donning armor. These artworks were meant to impress visitors and affirm the owner's cultural sophistication. Yet, you notice some cracks creeping in, evidence of time's slow decay, even in these more privileged spaces. It makes you think of the empire itself, glorious but fragile. You finish cleaning a hallway lined with tall windows that overlook the bustling Via Sacra below. The street is thronged with citizens and vendors, their colorful clothes blending into a moving tapestry. The noise floats upward, bartering voices, the clatter of cart wheels, and the braying of animals. You spot a group of gladiators passing by, their presence causing a stir. Gladiators were both admired and reviled, living on the edge of society. You recall that historians still debate how willingly gladiators fought and whether their lives were truly a spectacle or a desperate bid for survival. Moving on, you reach a small study where a man pores over documents by candlelight. The flickering flame casts deep shadows across his face as he scribbles notes. You wonder what secrets these papers hold. Perhaps trade contracts, property deeds, or letters from distant provinces. The bureaucracy of the empire was vast and complex, with layers of officials managing everything from grain supplies to military logistics. Even in this quiet corner, the empire's machinery hums unseen. Suddenly, a soft melody drifts through an open door. A young woman playing a harp, her fingers dancing expertly over the strings. Music was an essential part of elite Roman culture, taught from childhood alongside rhetoric and philosophy. You pause, savoring the delicate notes that seem to lighten the heavy air of wealth and responsibility. It's a stark contrast to the raucous songs you heard down below in the taverns. As you round a corner, you nearly trip over a small dog, a sleek greyhound with a jeweled collar. Pets were a luxury here, symbols of status and affection. You crouch to scratch behind the dog's ears, and it wags its tail appreciatively. Keeping exotic pets was also a trend. Some wealthy Romans prized monkeys, peacocks, or even snakes. It's another thread in the fabric of social distinction you're surrounded by. You move toward a large balcony that offers a sweeping view of the city skyline. From here, the vastness of Rome is breathtaking. The rooftops packed tightly, the domes of temples catching the fading light, the winding Tiber River glittering like a silver snake. You let out a long breath, feeling the pulse of the city beneath you. Despite the luxury and power on this floor, you're reminded that Rome's strength comes from every level, from slaves to senators, janitors to generals. A sudden gust of wind flutters a curtain and carries the faint scent of jasmine and pine, reminders of gardens tucked away in secret courtyards. Gardens were an oasis for the wealthy, places to escape the city's noise and heat. You remember that some Romans imported plants and trees from far-flung provinces to show off their reach and refinement. The tradition of these private green spaces influenced garden design for centuries after. You glance at a nearby door, slightly ajar, revealing a room filled with scrolls and books. Literacy was a prized skill among the elite, and the spread of written works, philosophy, poetry, law, helped shape Roman culture. Historians still argue whether the empire's vastness diluted or enriched its intellectual traditions. You finish your sweeping and take a final look around. Despite the grandeur and elegance, there is a quiet tension here, an awareness that fortune is fleeting. The residents hustle behind their refined masks, managing households, politics, and personal ambitions. You think about your own place in this world, the janitor who cleans the footprints of history and the stories unfolding every day. With a satisfied nod, you prepare to descend back to the lower floors, carrying with you the sights, sounds, and smells of a world just out of reach, but deeply connected to your own. The city hums beneath your feet, alive with endless stories, and you are part of its pulse, invisible but indispensable. You start your descent from the upper floors, the echoes of marble halls and silken curtains fading behind you as you head down to the middle tier of the insula, the Roman apartment building where you work. This level, the true middle ground of Rome's social ladder, buzzes with a different energy, a patchwork of tradespeople, artisans, and lower-ranking clerks who live in modest but respectable quarters. It's a world in between the dirt-streaked chaos of the ground level and the polished luxury of the penthouse suites above. The corridor smells of smoked fish and freshly baked bread, mingled with the faint tang of dye from nearby textile workshops. The air is thicker here, weighted with the everyday reality of dozens of lives intersecting in tight spaces. As you sweep, you pass doors ajar, revealing glimpses of family dinners, children doing their lessons by oil lamps, and the occasional argument over a missing coin or a broken tool. The walls, though sturdier than the flimsy wooden partitions below, show signs of wear. Faded frescoes peeling, small cracks spidering near the ceiling. You pause outside a room where a woman sits bent over a loom, weaving intricate patterns into cloth. Textile production was a major part of Rome's economy, and many families supplemented their income by weaving at home. Her fingers move rhythmically, a quiet dance producing fabric that might one day clothe a senator's wife or a gladiator sponsor. It strikes you how even the humblest artisan connects to the vast empire through their craft. Historians still argue whether such cottage industries sustained Rome's economy or simply masked deeper systemic problems. A few steps away, a blacksmith's apprentice hammers away in a tiny forge hidden behind a wooden door. The rhythmic clanging reverberates through the corridor, a steady heartbeat amid the chatter and footsteps. Weapons, tools, horseshoes. His work is essential, and yet the boy looks exhausted, muscles tense from long hours. You remember that in Rome, even skilled tradesmen were rarely free of debts or obligations. Social mobility was limited, and many were bound to guilds or patronage networks that controlled access to work. Further along, you see a group of young men gathered around a small table, playing a game of Latrunculi, an ancient Roman board game resembling chess or checkers. They laugh and joke, a welcome respite from the day's toil. Games were a popular pastime, enjoyed across classes, though historians still debate how much they reflected strategic thinking versus pure entertainment. You quietly admire their camaraderie, a fragile thread holding together the strains of daily survival. You sweep past a room where the sound of a flute floats out, played by a boy with an eager but uncertain hand. Music education here is less formal than in the upper floors, often learned by ear or passed down from family. This boy might dream of becoming a performer in the city's theaters or public festivals, ambitions that seem distant but not impossible. The arts had a way of transcending social barriers in Rome, a fascinating paradox that continues to puzzle scholars. Your path takes you to the communal latrine, a necessary but notorious feature of Roman apartment life. The scent here is pungent, a mix of stale urine, damp stone, and the occasional splash of water. You cringe, but your broom must reach even this unpleasant corner. Latrines were surprisingly social spaces, with residents exchanging gossip or politics while sitting side by side on stone benches with holes. This social aspect of hygiene still puzzles historians, who debate whether it fostered community or simply reflected necessity. Nearby, a mother struggles to quiet her crying infant while balancing a pot on the fire. The hardships of family life are on full display. Children crying, neighbors shouting, the constant churn of chores. You remember that infant mortality rates were high in Rome, and many families lived with the constant fear of losing a child. Yet, despite this, the household is alive with resilience and care. Passing a stairwell, you spot a small altar dedicated to household gods, the Laras and Penates, nestled in a niche. The shrine is adorned with tiny offerings, fresh bread, a pinch of incense, and a small figurine. Worship of these spirits was deeply personal, meant to protect the home and family. You touch the dusty ledge gently, aware that these small rituals brought comfort amid the uncertainties of urban life. As you continue, you overhear a quarrel between two neighbors over a broken water pipe. The argument grows heated, voices rising above the usual hum. Water access was a constant issue in Roman apartment blocks, with many relying on communal fountains or pipes prone to leaks and blockages. Water disputes were common, reflecting the larger struggle to manage scarce resources in a growing city. Historians still debate how much these everyday conflicts influenced broader social tensions. A sudden shout draws your attention to a narrow alley where a young street vendor argues with a customer over the price of figs. The vendor's sharp tongue and quick wit remind you that commerce in Rome was as much about negotiation as supply. Market stalls overflowed with goods from across the empire, spices from the east, olives from Hispania, garum fish sauce from Gaul. This bustling trade network kept the city fed and lively, but also bred competition and occasional violence. You catch sight of a small shrine to Fortuna outside a baker's doorway, surrounded by freshly baked loaves. Fortuna's presence here again reminds you how pervasive the belief in fate and luck was across classes. Whether a merchant made a profit or a family stayed healthy often seemed to hinge on these unseen forces. The everyday superstitions and rituals that permeated Roman life fascinate you, how they shaped decisions and calmed anxieties alike. Turning a corner, you notice a cluster of laundry hung out to dry, swaying gently in the warm breeze. Laundry was a constant chore, often done by women and slaves, with expensive garments requiring special care. The stark contrast between these simple tasks and the grand banquets upstairs never ceases to amaze you. Life in Rome was a patchwork of extremes, stitched together by the everyday efforts of countless hands. You pause outside a tavern where a group of men share a noisy drink, their laughter spilling into the corridor. Taverns were important social hubs, places to exchange news, debate politics, and unwind after a long day. The tavern's smoky interior smells of stale wine and roasted meat, a tempting distraction, but one you must resist. You recall that many Roman authors warned against overindulgence, advising moderation as a virtue. Historians still debate whether these moral lessons were followed or ignored by the average citizen. Near the stairwell, you catch the glint of bronze coins dropped by a child collecting tips for singing outside the bakery. Children played many roles in Roman society, from apprentices to street performers, contributing to family income when possible. Childhood itself was a precarious time, filled with both play and hardship, a contrast to the carefully controlled lives of elite youth. Finally, you sweep the final corridor, tired but aware that your work here sustains this lively, complicated community. The middle floors may lack the glamour of the upper tiers, but they pulse with life, ambition, and quiet struggle, a testament to the city's true backbone. As you prepare to descend again to the noisy chaos of the ground floor, you carry with you the sights, sounds, and stories of this vibrant tier, knowing that Rome's greatness depends on every level. You press onward, leaving behind the middle floors and stepping down toward the ground level of the insula, where life hums with a raw, vibrant, and often chaotic energy. This is the world closest to the street, where the noise never quite fades and the smells, some pleasant, many not, create a thick, almost tangible atmosphere. Here, the hustle of vendors, the clatter of carts, and the constant chatter of neighbors create a symphony of urban survival. The ground floor is a patchwork of shops, workshops, and cramped living quarters. Here, your broom strokes gather dust and scraps that tell stories of daily struggle and unexpected small victories. You catch the scent of burning resin and spilled wine, mingled with the sour tang of fermenting food. The air is warmer here, trapped between stone walls and the bustle of the Roman streets. You stop outside a small bakery where the baker's apprentice tosses dough with expert flicks, shaping loaves destined for hungry mouths. Bread was the staple of Roman diets, and the annona, the state grain dole, ensured that even the poorest could afford a daily ration. Yet, bread shortages occasionally sparked unrest. Historians still debate whether these supply interruptions were accidental or politically motivated. A child darts past, clutching a piece of stale bread, chased by a scolding mother. Children in Rome often had to fend for themselves, selling goods or performing chores to help their families. You remember that the average life expectancy was low, and childhood was a precarious phase. But amidst hardship, moments of joy persist. This kid's laughter echoing in the alley is one of them. Nearby, a shoemaker taps his hammer steadily, fashioning sandals from thick leather strips. Footwear was a status symbol, and the cheap, durable calici worn by soldiers were famously sturdy. Civilian sandals varied in quality, often reflecting social standing. The shoemaker grunts as he works, sweat tracing lines down his dust-covered face. You glance into a cramped room where a widow sorts through faded clothes, trying to patch what she can. Widows often face precarious economic conditions. Many depended on patronage or small trades. The social safety nets you might expect today were absent in ancient Rome. Instead, survival hinged on community ties and sheer grit. The noise swells as you near a busy tavern. The wooden door swings open, revealing a rowdy crowd inside. Tavern culture was central to Roman urban life, a place for gossip, politics, and brief escapes from hardship. The smell of roasted meat, spilled wine, and stale smoke fills the air. You recall that emperors themselves were wary of taverns, fearing they could become hotbeds of sedition. Historians still argue about the real political influence of these establishments. You pause near a street corner where a vendor hawks garum, the pungent fermented fish sauce that was Roman cuisine's secret weapon. The stench is almost unbearable, yet garum was a prized condiment, imported and produced throughout the empire. This curious contrast between foul smell and culinary delight fascinates you. It's like the ancient world's version of blue cheese or durian fruit, an acquired taste. Suddenly, a stray dog barks and weaves through your legs. Dogs were common companions and guards, but also scavengers in crowded urban spaces. Some were prized for loyalty, others were barely tolerated. This particular mutt looks more interested in scraps than company, a familiar figure in this bustling microcosm. You reach a small courtyard where laundry hangs overhead on lines stretched between buildings. Women gather, chatting softly as they work. Laundry day was a communal event, a chance to exchange news and gossip. You think about how these daily rituals wove social fabric as much as they cleaned clothes. This collective labor sustained neighborhoods and created bonds often overlooked by historians. The ground floor also hosts the less savory corners of city life. You glimpse a group of men gathered in shadow, exchanging coins and whispered deals. Gambling, prostitution, and petty crime thrived here, feeding off the crowded anonymity. Roman law was strict, but enforcement uneven. Historians still debate how much official tolerance these activities received, balancing morality with pragmatism. A sudden shout breaks through, the cry of a street vendor who's been cheated. His voice rising above the din haggling was the lifeblood of commerce here, and disputes flared often. You remember that some vendors were tied to guilds or collegia, early forms of trade unions, which offered some protection. These social organizations played a key role in the economic and political life of the city. You sweep past a cramped living space where a family prepares a modest meal. The aroma of lentils and herbs mixes with the sharp tang of garlic. Food was simple but flavorful, reflecting Rome's diverse cultural influences. You note how even the poorest tried to add variety and spice to their diets, a testament to human creativity in adversity. As you finish the courtyard, you spot a wall painted with a faded election advertisement, a reminder of Rome's complex political life, even at street level. Citizens here, many of whom lacked full voting rights, still participated in local politics through client-patron relationships and neighborhood pressure. The politics of the insula were as intricate as the empire itself. You paused to rest, leaning your broom against a rough stone wall. Despite the grime, noise, and hardship, the ground floor pulses with life and resilience. Every corner tells a story of survival, hope, and the human spirit's stubborn refusal to be crushed. It's a world far removed from marble columns and Senate speeches, but just as vital to the story of Rome. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows through the alleyways. As you prepare to end your day's work, you think about the layers of this city, how every stair you climb or descend reveals a different facet of Roman life. And though you're just a janitor, a humble caretaker of these spaces, you carry within you the countless stories of those who call this place home. You step into the evening haze, the air cooling slightly but the city's pulse still relentless. Your day's work has you moving now toward the rooftops, those flat, often crowded terraces where the insula's residents retreat after sunset. This is a quieter world, perched above the cacophony of the streets, yet no less alive with stories. Rooftops in Rome served multiple purposes: drying clothes, growing herbs, gathering socially, and occasionally just escaping the tight confines below. You drag your broom up the narrow stairwell, the weight reminding you of the day's long hours. The last slant of sun catches the terracotta tiles, bathing them in a warm glow that softens the rough edges of your world. From here, you get a panoramic glimpse of the city's sprawling mosaic, a sea of red roofs, smoke rising from cooking fires, and the distant glint of marble monuments. Despite the grime and cramped conditions below, there's an undeniable beauty to this ancient cityscape. You breathe in the faint scent of thyme and rosemary growing in small clay pots, the herbs a luxury and a necessity. You recall how Romans cultivated rooftop gardens, a practice historians trace back to earlier Mediterranean cultures. These rooftop spaces offered fresh air and a taste of nature in an urban jungle. They also served as quiet retreats for those lucky enough to have them. You brush a few dead leaves aside, aware that your daily sweep here is as much about preserving peace as tidiness. You see a group of teenagers gathered around a small fire pit, passing a wooden dice cup back and forth. Games of chance and skill were popular pastimes, and dice games in particular had a rich history in Rome. The dice themselves often bore symbols beyond simple numbers, sometimes even magical markings, because Romans believed fate could be influenced by luck and ritual. Historians still argue whether these superstitions were a reflection of deeper religious beliefs or just everyday folk practices. The conversation nearby is low but lively. Teenagers complain about the latest edicts from their landlord, a wealthy freedman known for his stinginess. It's a reminder that social tensions permeated even these elevated spaces. Freedmen like this landlord often occupied an ambiguous place in society. Once slaves, now property owners with ambitions that sometimes made them unpopular among long-established citizens. A young woman strums a lyre softly, her fingers deft despite the simplicity of the instrument. Music was central to Roman culture, and even the humblest households prized a chance to sing or play. She sings a fragment of a popular love poem, her voice light and wistful. You note how music and poetry were both entertainment and emotional outlets in these crowded lives. The walls may have been thin, but the arts helped connect people across social divides. You notice a small clay jar near the lyre player, a container for pasca, the sour wine drink favored by soldiers and laborers. Pasca was a cheap, acidic beverage that helped quench thirst and was said to aid digestion. You remember that while the elite sipped refined wines, pasca kept the working classes hydrated and somewhat spirited through long, sweaty days. This everyday drink is a testament to Rome's class divides, yet also to its shared human experiences. Suddenly, a gust of wind scatters some papers from a leaning stack near the stairwell. You scramble to catch them. Notes, letters, perhaps a tenant's accounts or a lover's scribbled promises. These scraps remind you how communication in the city was raw and personal, often passed hand to hand or shouted across courtyards. Postal services existed, but most messages were local and informal. You settle back, broom resting beside you, and watch the sky darken into a deep indigo. The first stars prick the night, and the city's lamps begin to flicker on, oil lamps and clay holders, their soft light flickering like fireflies. You think about how Romans had no electricity, but managed a vibrant nightlife fueled by these tiny flames and the noisy gatherings they lit. Below, laughter rises from a nearby tavern, mingling with the occasional shout and the rhythmic clatter of a water basin being refilled. You realize that even at this height, the city's heartbeat never fully slows. It's a living, breathing organism, with every floor, every room, every rooftop adding its own rhythm. You brush a stray pebble from the edge and lean over, looking down to the dimly lit streets. Shadows move, vendors packing up, late travelers hurrying home, and the occasional stray cat prowling for scraps. Cats were common in Roman homes, valued for controlling vermin, but often regarded with suspicion. Some Romans believed cats carried mystical powers. Others saw them as lazy freeloaders. You turn your gaze back upward and catch the flicker of a small shrine tucked into a corner. A lararium, the household altar dedicated to the protective spirits of the home. Even in these modest dwellings, faith found a place. The lararium held small figurines and offerings, reminding residents that divine protection was never far. Historians still argue how deeply personal versus public these religious practices truly were in daily Roman life. You sit down, your legs tired, and allow the quiet to settle around you. Despite your humble role, these rooftops offer moments of respite and reflection, reminders that even the most average day in Rome carries layers of complexity, history, and humanity. A soft wind brushes past, carrying faint scents of roasting chestnuts and wood smoke from distant neighborhoods. You let your eyes close briefly, hearing the murmur of the city and feeling the weight of time pressing gently on your shoulders. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, its own messes to clean and stories to witness. But for now, suspended between earth and sky, you find a fleeting peace. The early morning light creeps into your cramped quarters, stirring you awake like a reluctant whisper. Today, the air carries a hint of dampness from an overnight shower, a rare but refreshing change in Rome's persistent summer heat. You rub the sleep from your eyes, the faint smell of olive oil lamps still lingering from last night's flicker. It's time to get moving again. Your humble room is part of the labyrinthine tangle of the insula's upper floors, where the poorest tenants dwell. The walls here are thin, patched with worn plaster that peels in places, revealing brick beneath. You have just enough space to stretch and place your belongings: a battered broom, a bucket, and a few scraps of food. The creak of the wooden beams overhead reminds you that this building has weathered many years of noise, neglect, and lives lived in close quarters. You step outside and immediately feel the buzz of the insula waking up. Children dart past, barefoot and noisy, their laughter echoing off the rough stone walls. Some clutch bits of bread or fruit, their breakfast simple but cherished. Women lean out of windows, exchanging gossip and complaints with their neighbors while pounding laundry on stone basins or tending to small pots of herbs on ledges. It's a noisy, chaotic chorus of life, both exhausting and oddly comforting. As you descend the narrow staircase toward the ground floor, you pass a wall plastered with faded political slogans, campaign promises from candidates vying for office in the city. More grain, fairer taxes, they proclaim, though everyone knows such pledges rarely reach places like this. Historians still argue whether these popular posters truly influenced the common people's political engagement or were mostly ignored in favor of local power plays and bribes. The ground floor is where the real hustle begins. Market vendors set up tiny stalls nearby, shouting to passersby about fresh olives, cheap fish, or bundles of herbs. You hear a particularly spirited barter over a few sardines, the vendor's voice cracking as he insists they are fresher than the others. It's a daily battle for survival, not just for you, but for everyone eking out a living here. You step into the insula's shared courtyard, a small but crucial space ringed by the building's four walls. It's a mess of dirt, broken tiles, and scattered refuse, but it's the heart of this community. Laundry hangs from ropes tied between windows, fluttering in the breeze like colorful flags. Children chase chickens or kick a worn leather ball made from stitched scraps. Somewhere nearby, an elderly man taps out a rhythm on a wooden crate, an impromptu musician in this open-air theater. Your job today starts with the courtyard. You sweep and collect trash, your broom scraping over the uneven stones. The smells are a mix of stale sweat, cooking fires, and the faint sweetness of overripe fruit discarded by careless tenants. You notice a pile of crushed grapes near a doorway. Someone's unsuccessful attempt at making wine, no doubt. Homemade wine was a staple for many, but the quality varied wildly depending on luck and skill. As you work, you spot a group of women gathered around a basin, scrubbing clothes. One of them, an older woman with a face weathered like ancient parchment, nods at you with a tired smile. She is likely a long-time tenant, having watched the insula shift and change through decades of political upheaval and economic strain. You remember reading that some insulae lasted only a few years before collapsing under poor construction and overcrowding, but this one stubbornly remains. Nearby, a child tugs at a man's toga, asking for a coin. The man, a merchant by the look of his sandals and sash, ignores the plea and moves on. You catch a flash of the child's disappointed face, then look away quickly. Poverty is a constant, grinding companion here. You wonder if the child will make it through the day or end up scavenging in the city's vast garbage dumps. Places where discarded food scraps and broken pottery could mean the difference between hunger and fullness. Your thoughts wander to the Roman sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima, just a short distance away beneath the city streets. This massive engineering feat was one of Rome's proudest achievements, channeling waste away and reducing disease. Yet despite this, insula residents often lacked proper plumbing, relying on shared latrines, or even chamber pots emptied into the street. Historians still argue about how sanitary these conditions really were. Some claim the Cloaca Maxima made Rome healthier than many cities for centuries, while others suggest disease still spread rapidly in these dense neighborhoods. As you finish sweeping the courtyard, the air is filled with the sound of a trumpet call echoing from the city center. It signals the start of the day's official activities, the opening of markets, the summoning of public announcements, or even gladiatorial events, depending on the season. People pause, momentarily united by the rhythm of the city's routines. You glance toward the stairwell, where a small procession is gathering, probably tenants heading to work, school, or the nearby baths. Baths were an essential part of Roman life, not just for cleanliness, but for socializing, politics, and relaxation. Even the poorest residents try to visit public baths regularly when they could afford the modest entry fee. The baths feature hot and cold pools, steam rooms, and sometimes even exercise yards. Your gaze falls on a stray dog sniffing through discarded scraps near a tavern doorway. Dogs were common companions and protectors, but stray packs were also a city hazard. Romans had a complex relationship with animals. Some worshipped certain creatures as sacred or lucky, while others considered them pests or omens. You recall the curious case of a dog mummy discovered in Egypt during the Roman era, revealing how even animals could be part of religious rituals, a detail that keeps historians debating the extent of Roman animal worship. You turn your attention to your next task, cleaning the shared stairwell and hallways. The wooden steps groan underfoot as you sweep away dust and fallen leaves. Every corner you reach tells a story. Graffiti etched into the walls by bored youths, oil stains from lamp oil spills, and the faint scent of incense from a small altar near the entrance. Each sign hints at the lives entwined in this building, layered with memories and small dramas. While you work, you overhear a conversation about the upcoming festival of Vulcan, the god of fire and blacksmiths. The festival, known as the Vulcanalia, was celebrated in August to appease the deity and prevent destructive fires, a very real threat in these tightly packed wooden and brick buildings. You know that insula fires could be catastrophic, with entire blocks wiped out by a single careless spark. Firefighting was rudimentary, relying on bucket brigades and the vigilance of neighbors. The conversation shifts to rumors about a new edict from the city council concerning building regulations. Officials were trying to enforce safer construction methods to prevent disasters, but enforcement was spotty and often corrupted by bribes. Historians still argue how effective these regulations really were, given the frequent reports of insula collapses and fires during the imperial era. As the morning stretches on, you feel the familiar ache in your back and arms, but keep going. There's no pause for fatigue when the building depends on you. You glance at the small altar in the courtyard, where a few fresh offerings of bread and wine have been placed. It's a quiet reminder that even in the most average lives, hope and faith persist. A breeze carries the scent of fresh bread from a nearby bakery, mingling with the earthy smell of damp stone and wood. The city hums with life, loud, messy, and relentless. And you, the janitor of this insula, keep it turning, one sweep at a time. The afternoon sun has begun its slow descent, casting long, golden shadows across the insula's rough stone walls. The heat has softened into a warm, lazy glow that settles over everything like a gentle sigh. You pause briefly at the top of the stairwell, letting your eyes wander over the familiar chaos below. The courtyard is still buzzing with life. Children chase each other in fading light. Vendors pack up their stalls, and the distant clatter of carts rolling over cobblestones echoes faintly from the street beyond. You take a deep breath, the mingled sense of dust, with smoke, and baked bread filling your lungs. This is your world, the imperfect, stubborn heart of Rome's everyday life. And though no one sings songs about insula janitors, you know your work matters. You are the invisible hand keeping this place alive, the quiet witness to countless small stories playing out in this crowded, creaking hive. Your next task is to check the latrines, a grim but necessary chore. The shared facilities are tucked away in a dim corner, always smelling faintly of stale water and whatever else the tenants have left behind. You carry your bucket and brush, ready to tackle the mess with practiced efficiency. The stench is sharp, but you have learned to block it out, focusing instead on the rhythm of your movements. The latrines were a marvel of communal living, but also a source of endless complaint. People jostled for space, tried to keep the area clean, but overcrowding often won. Water ran through channels beneath the seats, carrying waste into the city's drainage system, but the smell still managed to cling stubbornly to the air. Historians still argue how much this system helped prevent disease versus how much it simply masked deeper sanitation problems in Rome's dense neighborhoods. As you scrub, Your mind drifts to the many rumors you overheard today, whispers of a new imperial decree to improve living conditions in Insula, promises of safer buildings and cleaner streets. You're skeptical. Promises from the top have a way of vanishing before they reach your floor. Still, the hope is a small comfort in a world where stability is rare and fleeting. You finish the latrine cleaning and move back toward the main stairwell, feeling the familiar ache in your muscles, but also a quiet satisfaction. The insula may be imperfect, dusty, noisy, overcrowded, but it is home to hundreds of people, each with their own dreams and struggles. You glance up, noticing a small spider weaving its web in a corner. A tiny architect in a vast city, working quietly without fanfare. It reminds you of yourself in some ways. Returning to the courtyard, you notice a few tenants gathered around a small fire pit, roasting chestnuts as the evening cools. The smoke curls lazily upward, mingling with the sounds of soft conversations and laughter. Life continues, relentless and beautiful in its ordinary rhythms. As dusk deepens, the city's noises soften. The clatter of carts fades, and even the children's laughter grows quieter, replaced by the occasional bark of a dog or the distant call of a night bird. The insula settles into its nightly breathing, a living thing ready to rest and begin again tomorrow. You make your way back upstairs, tired but content. Your broom leans against the wall, and your bucket rests by the door, ready for another day. You pause at your small altar, placing a handful of grain and a pinch of incense as a silent thanks for endurance, for another day survived. The night air cools your skin, and through the open window, you glimpse the stars blinking faintly above the city's rooflines. Rome is vast and eternal, and you are just one small part of its endless story, a janitor in an insula, sweeping away the dust of history with steady hands. And as you finally lay your head down to rest, you know tomorrow will bring the same noise, the same struggle, the same ordinary miracles. Because in the end, it is these small, steady acts, the sweeping, the cleaning, the holding of space, that keep the city breathing and alive. Word count, 1,087. 300-word wind down. Now, as the story comes to a gentle close, let your mind drift slowly with the fading light. Imagine the soft hum of the city at night, the quiet murmurs from behind closed doors, the occasional footsteps echoing faintly down narrow streets, the whisper of the breeze moving through olive trees. You've walked the worn stairs, breathed the dust and warmth of an ancient insula, and met the quiet resilience of a janitor whose work is never seen, but always essential. There is something comforting in this ordinary life, something steady and true. No grand battles or heroic feats, just the daily rhythm of existence, carried on by hands that know the value of care and persistence. The world turns, the city breathes, and beneath it all, the small light of human hope endures. So now, with the stars shining softly above and the cool night wrapping around you like a blanket, let your thoughts ease and settle. Breathe deeply, slowly, and let the gentle sounds of the past and present blend into a calm lullaby. Thank you for sharing this journey. May your dreams be filled with quiet strength, steady hands, and the warm glow of ancient street lamps. Good night.